Welcome to Healthier Together, Larimer County's public health podcast, where we come together for healthier lives, connected communities, and real conversations. From your local public health team, I'm your host, Tom.
And I'm Joanna. Today, we are excited to talk about air quality with Stefanie Shoup, Deputy Director for Regulatory Affairs for the Air Pollution Control Division at cdphe. Stefanie, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm happy to be here.
To start, can you tell us a little bit more about the Air Pollution Control Division and the work that you do?
Absolutely. So the Air Pollution Control Division is a part of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. So it's an environmental agency, and we are tasked with developing and maintaining and implementing the program to protect air quality in Colorado under the Clean Air Act, the Federal Clean Air Act, as well as under the State Air Act. So we are in charge of looking at all things air quality and air pollution and managing all of those programs.
How do you collect data about air quality in Colorado?
There are a lot of different ways. Part of this really goes into a combination of on-site monitoring that we can do where we're actually measuring different concentrations in the atmosphere, to looking at broad research studies that maybe have been done across geographic areas where we can better understand what might be happening more generally, emission calculations that we can use based on understanding of different types of equipment, as well as looking at federal data that has come out that estimates different types of emission sources or uses other methodologies to try to understand what emissions are coming from different types of sources. So we kind of look at any and all data sources that we can get our hands on and use that to help inform where we need to focus and where there are opportunities for protecting public health and for trying to address any issues of concern.
Here at the health department, we have some air monitoring stations where we collect ambient air data. It sounds like you use data from a variety of sources, from state to local to federal. Is that right?
We are big on, a lot of us are engineers and scientists, and we really like data. So we spend a lot of time looking for where there might be data that we haven't considered or thought of, and how it could be used. And I think one thing we've been doing over the last several years in particular is developing really close relationships with academic organizations. So Colorado State University, University of Colorado, Colorado School of Mines. We've worked really closely with all of them, but also universities like University of Texas or Stanford, even Harvard. So working with these different academic organizations who are looking at different elements of air quality research and really trying to better understand how we can use the research they're doing to better inform our policies, but also how we can give them better information on the questions we have. So maybe they can be using that as they're developing their future research studies.
What are the primary causes of poor air quality here in Colorado?
So poor air quality is an interesting concept because we have different rules and requirements depending on the pollutants type. And so we have a lot of different pollutants where we are nowhere near any kind of health standard. So we sometimes think of poor air quality kind of in this macro, it's either good or it's bad. And that's not really the case in reality, right? The truth is that we were always somewhere in the middle. There are certain pollutants where we have days where we have poorer air quality because those pollutants like ozone are really high on those days. And then other days where that is very low. Most of the winter, we're not dealing with any kind of ozone concerns, right? So it really depends. Particulate matter is another one where when we have smoke coming from wildfires, we have really poor air quality specifically due to particulate matter. And then other days, most of the time, where it's completely fine for particulate matter. So I think the primary sources that we're dealing with here in Colorado are, again, those wildfires. That's a really big problem. But when we're talking about things that we have some control over, a lot of this is coming from cars. We have to really think about this as like a local, regional, and global issue. There are issues around total emissions coming from the state. But then there are also issues around where is that pollution coming from and is it concentrated in a specific area? So part of the reason we have this ozone non-attainment area is because we have a lot of concentration of sources, cars, oil and gas, other manufacturing and industrial sources, plus a lot of people right here in a geographic area that's really prone to kind of trapping and holding that pollution and allowing it to turn into ozone. So, and having a lot of sunlight, which we all love, that helps that turn into ozone. So we have some unique things. So that's more about the concentration as opposed to just kind of statewide it being a huge problem. It's really more concentrated in this area. So it really depends on what part of the state you're in, what the biggest sources of air pollution might be in that area.
So, for people who are curious about what the air quality in their region looks like and what that historical data looks like, is there a place they can go to see air quality data for their region?
We have so much data online. This has been something we've been working on really diligently over the last many years. Some of you may know, but there's been a tremendous amount of impetus or interest from our legislature in air quality since around 2020, 2019. And with that, they gave us quite a bit of money and a lot of resources to start building things that make information more publicly accessible in a way that we weren't able to always, we just didn't have the resources to do in the past. And so that's been a really exciting thing as someone who's been with the Air Division for a really long time about trying to make this information more publicly accessible, but also more accessible to understand, not just here's a bunch of data, because that's something that we love data. So we put a lot of data out there, but we're also working really hard on how do we make that data better understandable to the general public. So we have a lot of different sites on our website, and I'm happy to share those with you. It's hard for me to just say what they are, but there are a lot of different ways that you can go in. We have some maps where you can go in and kind of zoom in on areas, see what sources are around you, click on those sources and see more information about them. So there are a lot of different ways to look at different data sources that we're putting up on our websites.
Speaking of making air quality data easy to understand, I think air quality in particular, there can be a lot of information to parse when you try to look to understand. If someone is just trying to plan their day to know how to limit their exposure potentially to ozone or particulate matter, maybe they have someone who's more vulnerable to poor air quality in their family. What would you suggest people look to kind of plan their day-to-day activities around poor air quality days?
Yeah, we have alerts. So we often put those on like our Facebook pages or other social media pages. We also have a website that specifically has those kinds of alerts. It's really around trying to provide the information so people can make choices. Some people are going to be more sensitive to particulate matter, for example, and therefore they may want to take extra precautions on those days, whereas others may feel very comfortable still interacting and acting in the world as they normally do. So we just want to make sure that information is available and that they understand when those different pollutants kind of go up or down so that they can make decisions for themselves.
What sorts of activities or policies does CDPHE use to address air quality concerns at the state level?
So many. We're pretty active and have always been at looking within the authorities that we have, because our authorities are dictated by statute and by what the legislature has said we can do. But to say, how do we use those to best affect actual emission reductions where we really need them and where people are going to benefit from that? And so we are always looking for and evaluating what kind of policies can we put into place. Some of those can be in the form of rulemakings, where we develop a new rule or we revise an existing rule to pull new things in or have additional requirements on source types. So oil and gas is a great example of that. We've done a tremendous amount of work on regulating oil and gas since 2014 and even prior to 2014 that has resulted in some of the strictest oil and gas rules in the entire world. And there are a lot of other areas where maybe we haven't had quite as much focus on. And so we're really looking at those now to say, okay, what else do we need to get to? Because it's one thing to say, yes, we can reduce from this source, but we really need to be looking kind of across where are the best benefits to reduce emissions. We've also seen priority toxic air contaminants where we've gotten authority just only in the last few years to actually regulate those directly. Prior to that, we did not have permission or authority in the statute to regulate those pollutants. And so that's a very exciting thing as someone who has worked to try to reduce emissions from air toxics through other mechanisms, but now we have very direct authority to reduce those emissions. And so that is a program that's going to take a long time to really truly build out, but we've started it, and that's a really exciting thing. So a lot of different ways. Other ways that we look at this are, what are we doing in permitting? Are there ways that we can adjust or change permit conditions to make sure that things are well communicated and that we can show when they're not complying so that we can then go pursue enforcement, which then ultimately turns around and changes behavior as well. So there are a lot of different ways that we try to accomplish this. We also do a lot of outreach. I mean, a part of the reason why we do so much outreach, not only to the community but also to industrial sources, is because sometimes it's an education problem. We need to make sure they know what they're supposed to be doing so that they can have the opportunity to comply and actually reduce those emissions. And so we do a lot of that kind of outreach, but we also do it within the community and within the public, because a lot of that pollution is coming from sources we can't directly regulate, like your car. We can't tell you can only buy a car that can do this, right? We don't have the authority in Colorado to do that. That's a federal requirement. They can kind of set standards across all cars, but we cannot set individual standards on you as an individual and what car you buy. But we can tell you, okay, here are the pros and cons of these different types of cars. And we can tell you, oh, we have some money that we can offer for electric vehicles so that we can see a reduction in emissions in these localized areas where we really need to see them. So the Denver metro area or any metro area is a really great example. The more electric you have in those concentrated areas, the better, because you're reducing the emissions from that local area and allowing for healthier environment in that local area, because now you've relocated those emissions to somewhere else where they can be better controlled by power plants. So there's good and bad with all environmental strategies have to be balanced. But really, when we're thinking about this, we have to think about it from, how is this going to help and is it going to accomplish the goal? And so we're always thinking about that.
I saw that cdphe recently adopted measures to control emissions of 5 new priority air toxic contaminants. Can you tell us a little bit more about those new regulations and how we hope they'll impact air quality in the state?
Absolutely. So I mentioned a little bit before, but we really didn't have permission, right, under the statute to regulate hazardous air pollutants historically. It was very limited to only what the federal government had done, and that changed about 4 years ago. And we were assigned the task, which we were very happy to do, to go and look and identify 5 priority toxic air contaminants. So understanding there are thousands and thousands of hazardous air pollutants out there. And there are even more that are not considered hazardous air pollutants, but that we might consider toxic air contaminants. So we looked at them and tried to understand which are the ones that are going to have the most opportunity for reductions and the most public health benefit if we address those. And so that's what we did with the first 5. The priority toxic air contaminants are things like benzene, formaldehyde, ethylene oxide, hexavalent chromium, and H2S, which is hydrogen sulfide. So those are the 5 that we identified as being the ones to prioritize first and to really look at. And so there were several steps and several rulemakings that went into getting to the point where in April, we were able to bring emission control requirements to the commission for adoption for each of those 5, where there are now requirements for some sources of those pollutants to reduce their emissions, either by having an emission standard or by having a new control requirement or by looking for leaks more often or seeing things that they have to fix more frequently. So there are a lot of different ways. It also could be that they're replacing the use of a certain product. Hexavalent chromium is something that you use in chrome plating. And so if they use a different type of chemical, they can reduce their hexavalent chromium emissions in their area just by using a different chemical compound to do the chrome plating. So there are a lot of different options, and that's where we started, and we're really excited about those emission control requirements.
Where else do those 5 air toxic pollutants come from typically?
Come from a lot of industrial practices, and they're all 5 of them are actually very distinct in terms of the type of industry that they tend to come from. There are some overlaps, but a lot of them are kind of distinct, which did make that a very challenging rulemaking. I mentioned before that hexavalent chromium is a part of chrome plating, and so that's one of the places where those can come from. Another one, there are 4 others. So ethylene oxide, that comes through medical equipment sterilization. We really want to have medical equipment that is healthy and safe to be used in doctors' offices and hospitals, but the sterilization that they use ethylene oxide to actually sterilize that equipment, and when that comes out, it is considered a priority toxic air contaminant. It's not very healthy for us to breathe. Benzene is another that comes from the refinery, that comes from oil and gas sources. We focused primarily on refineries in this particular rule, largely because so much of the work that we've done on oil and gas over the last decade plus has also reduced a lot of benzene. Benzene is a component of natural gas, so everything we did to reduce our emissions of other things also reduced benzene kind of at the same rate. So it just really made sense to focus where we did for benzene. Formaldehyde is an interesting one because it comes from anything that burns fuel. So it is generated during wildfires. It's any cars or engines or any kind of equipment that non-road engines, so any of the construction equipment out there that's burning fuel, any of those will emit formaldehyde. But it's also something that, as the normal process of breakdown of organic compounds in our atmosphere, it also just develops in the atmosphere. So it develops when we're burning it at kind of these concentrated levels, but also when it's just breaking out down normally in the atmosphere, it's also develops formaldehyde. It's just one of the products, and so that one can be a little bit tricky to try to get a handle on, and where is it coming from in a particular case if we're measuring it. But we focused really on engines for that one. And then the last one was hydrogen sulfide, which is a component that often comes from wastewater treatment plants or other kind of breakdown of waste, of organic waste. But it also comes from fossil fuel extraction and refining, because again, fossil fuel and refining is just really old organic matter. And so it is something that can kind of come from that process when there's sulfur in that mixed in there, that will actually generate H2S, which is kind of the stinky component a lot of the time of what we think about coming out of a wastewater treatment. But it also is not great to breathe in high quantities or in high doses. And so it's just another one that we wanted to prioritize.
cdphe also does a lot of air quality education and outreach and has lots of great resources for people who want to learn more about air quality or get involved. Can you tell us a little bit more about that component of your work?
Absolutely. This is one of the things that I'm so incredibly excited about. We have done a lot over the last 6 or 7 or 8 years to go from not really having a whole lot of formalized outreach to having whole programs that only do outreach. And their goal is just to make better relationships with communities, provide better information, build out our websites. So there's an incredible amount of work that goes in with our team that actually goes out into the community. And one of the things that they've been doing is putting together either kind of generalized air quality 101 types of trainings, just to talk about what does it mean? What does air quality mean? What does that mean in the sense of what they can do? And then also where there are specific concerns or if there are areas of interest or when we are going to do a rulemaking, for example, we will have a lot more outreach to communities that might be affected as well as the public in general and talk about what it is that we're considering doing, why we're considering doing it in the way that we're proposing, what that means, and what kind of options can we take or what kind of information can we take to make sure that we are uh, taking into consideration the feedback that we get from the public and from communities. And so there's a lot of really neat opportunities to learn more. And we hope that people will take the time to go and look at all of the websites that we put together. We have a lot of different, really data heavy websites. So you can go if you want to like go down into the weeds, but also higher level, like this is kind of generally what this stuff means on our website to try to provide information at whatever level is most helpful to different people. So that has been, I think, one of the things I'm most proud of the division in doing over the last several years is developing out that program.
We've talked a lot about policies at the state level that can help improve air quality. Are there steps that individuals can take in their day-to-day lives to help improve the air quality in their region?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the things that we as an air agency have the hardest time trying to address are things that have to do with kind of personal behavior. And that might be what kind of lawn equipment you buy and use, whether it's electric or it's gas powered. What kind of choices you make in terms of vehicles. We do provide incentives for purchasing electric vehicles, but that is still not necessarily readily available to a lot of people. But there are still things that can be done, like filling up your car later in the day, because every time you fill up your car, there are volatile organic compounds that come out that mix with the other pollutants and create ozone. And so anything that can be done to kind of limit those all being in our atmosphere in that hottest part of the day, the better. So a lot of times, especially when it comes to ozone, it's not about total, it's kind of about when. There's a lot of emphasis on when because it's when we have those really long, sunny days that we tend to have a lot more ozone development. And so, if we can reduce emissions during those time periods to be later in the evening or early morning, then we can potentially see some benefit. And everyone is definitely important to contribute to that. So, another thing is just fires. As much as we all love our fires, and I certainly am one that does, we, look at air quality in our kind of local area and our neighborhoods. And sometimes you have poor air quality because we've got a certain weather event. And then if everyone's burning their fires, then that can create issues, whether it's an indoor or outside kind of fireplace. And then, of course, please be careful this summer for wildfire protection because I think we all know that we have a higher risk this year, and we want to make sure that people are safe and healthy. And we would love to see as much prevention of wildfires as we can for all of our benefit.
If people would like to learn more about air quality, sign up for alerts this summer, find historical data, any of the things that we talked about today, where can they go to do so?
We have some really great websites that we can provide people, and we will provide those to you that you can absolutely please share. We've also got email listservs that people can sign up for. So if there are specific topics that you're interested in, you can sign up for that listserv, and then you'll get the emails anytime that we are going to be doing something related to that topic. So I really hope that if you're interested in learning more, that you go and take a look at our websites, see what we've got. We'll share all of that detail with you here. And please get involved and contribute and help us all have good and better air quality as we move forward. Of
Awesome, Steph. Thank you so much for joining us today.
course. Thank you.
To learn more about the Air Pollution Control Division or sign up for air quality alerts, visit cdphe.colorado.gov. cdphe.colorado.gov/apcd. You can also find that link in today's show notes. Do you have a question about public health in Larimer County or a topic you'd like us to discuss? Let us know. Email us at healthiertogether@larimer.org. Thanks for listening, Larimer County.
Until next week, stay well, stay connected, and remember, we really are healthier together.